In what's turned out to be a controversial move, the Commerce Department says when you get your census questionnaire in 2020, it will include a citizenship question. The census is meant to count total population, not just U.S. citizens. And there's a lot at stake in these numbers. It's an old system that for decades has helped determine how many congressional districts states have, how much access we have to federal funds. Well, adding this new question has certainly stirred things up. Critics believe asking the question, are you a citizen, is anti-immigrant and would result in lower population counts and therefore mean less funding for states with high immigration populations. Well, joining us to talk about these developments is Christian Solano Cordova, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. We've also asked Dr. Seth Maskett from DU to stay with us for this conversation as well. So thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for staying. So the goal is to count everyone here, but there's concern here that, Christian, that this would lead to a lot of people just not even participating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every day there's federal agents, dragging mothers and fathers out of homes. So, when a census worker comes up and knocks on your door and asks you how many citizens or how many citizens are in this household, people that are undocumented or even mixed status families with, some of their family are citizens or residents and then other parts of their family are undocumented, are a lot less likely to, answer any of those questions or return the census survey because, seeing this continued pattern of the Trump administration, trying to get information about immigrants from anywhere it can. Recently it was announced that, ICE was getting information from Facebook. Another reason why we should be worried about our data. I think I would be worried. I am worried, and I could see how a lot of people in the community are going to be worried that answering any of those questions might be supplying a list of undocumented immigrants to the government to follow up on.
So what do you think when you hear that, knowing how this census has operated over these generations?
I mean, this is adding this question is a great way to get biased results. What the Constitution requires the census to conduct what it calls an actual enumeration. It tries to count all the people in the country, not just citizens, not just adults, but everyone who's here. And if you're including a question, are you a citizen, that is intimidating to many people. And it will encourage some people not to answer the questions and try to avoid the census. And as a result of that, you're going to get an undercount. And the census has always struggled with, the ability to count everyone. This is a way to count fewer people, and particularly in areas with larger immigrant communities, particularly states with larger cities with immigrant communities. That would ultimately mean those states would suffer a great deal because a lot of what the government does is based on the number of people in different areas, whether that's representation, how many people are in a congressional district, or whether that's Social Security funding or Medicare funding.
Sure.
A lot of those numbers
would be
big
issues
skewed.
at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is the underlying issue behind adding this question? What do you think ultimately is the goal by adding this? And did the Trump administration, do you think, either one of you, really know that this would be an implication?
Well, to me, it's hard to really know what the goal of this question is because they kind of rushed it through the process. They didn't, usually a question like this goes through rigorous review. They test it out, see how people respond to it, and then they can use that information to project how many people are going to participate. We already have a problem with people of color and minorities participating in the census. And I don't know what the objective of the administration is, but the end goal or the end result will be diminished participation, particularly in communities of color, which already are underrepresented in our political system.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, you could view this a couple of different ways. This could just be sort of sloppy last-minute work in which they just said, well, we're interested in knowing citizenship and not really thinking what the consequences of that action would be. Or it could be more seriously an effort to try and undercount certain areas and try and create less representation and less funding for more immigrant concentrated areas of the country, and thus give an advantage to other parts of the country.
So could there be a better way? I mean, it does seem pretty antiquated. You get a form, you have to fill it out. I don't know. I mean, there has to be a better way to figure out who our population is, correct?
Well,
maybe, maybe not.
That's hard to say. the way that we've had for a while now, you don't necessarily need a citizenship question in there to figure out who's doing it, but it has required a very serious investment for the Census Board every 10 years to just figure out who's here. It's required, not just doing a mail-in survey, but actually training a great many people to go out into different communities and simply try and count everyone and try and talk to everyone out there. It's a very serious effort that requires a good deal of training and professionalization and a lot of thought ahead of time as to what sort of questions are being asked.
Well, which brings up another point. If you don't answer the questions, there is a risk of someone coming in knocking at your door. Is that a fear as well?
Yeah, I mean, the last census, someone came to my door and asked me about my situation. And I mean, at that point, I was 15 years old. If they were to come again to another 15-year-old kid and ask them a citizenship question, I would get all choked up, and I probably would just kind of stop answering the questions.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for the conversation, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I think a lot of us are wondering what's happening with the census and what the implications are, and I think you both have helped shed some light. So thank you very much. We'll be right back.